You really expect me to believe you're a doctor? The officer let out a short, mocking laugh as he yanked Elijah Reed's car door open and grabbed him by the collar, dragging him out like his words meant nothing. The hospital ID around Elijah's neck slapped against his chest, completely ignored. "Out of the car! Now!" The shove came hard and sudden, sending Elijah stumbling before he slipped and hit the pavement. Pain shot through his shoulder as a knee drove into his back, pinning him there. "Elijah! BP's crashing. We're losing her!" Rosa's voice burst from the phone lying just inches from his outstretched hand, still connected to the operating room waiting for him. The officer glanced at it and scoffed. "Hear that? Nice story. Anything to get out of a ticket." Elijah clenched his jaw, his hands steady against the ground, and somewhere across town, the woman fighting for her life had a last name that would change everything. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The evening had settled into a rare moment of peace. Doctor. Elijah Reed sank deeper into his favorite armchair, his shoulders finally relaxing after 16 hours in surgery. The soft lamplight and the sound of rain beginning to tap against the windows made him feel the full weight of his exhaustion. Naomi sat across from him, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed student files from her last semester as principal. She glanced up and smiled. "You should eat something before you fall asleep right there." I know. Elijah's eyes were already closing. "Just give me 5 minutes." His phone erupted with its distinct emergency ringtone. Both of them froze, knowing what that sound meant. Elijah reached for it immediately, professional instincts cutting through his fatigue. "Dr. Reed." His voice was clear and focused. "Doctor, this is Rosa Delgado at St. Catherine's." The charge nurse's tone carried immediate urgency. "We have a critical vascular case incoming. Massive internal bleeding from what looks like a ruptured thoracic aneurysm. Dr. Williams is stuck in Baltimore due to weather delays." Elijah sat up straight, every trace of exhaustion gone. "What's the patient's status?" "BP's dropping fast. Or, Team 1 is assembling, but we need you. You're the only one within reach with enough experience in thoracic repair. Patient will be here in 10 minutes. Start full trauma protocol," Elijah instructed, already moving. "Type and cross for at least 6 units. Get fresh frozen plasma ready. I want full imaging pulled up before I arrive." He grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. Naomi was already holding out his hospital ID badge. Their eyes met, decades of understanding passing between them. "Order dopamine and have it standing by," he continued to Rosa while checking his pockets for keys. "Start broad-spectrum antibiotics. Monitor for signs of cardiac tamponade." "Yes, doctor. How long until you can get here?" Elijah calculated quickly. 15 minutes if traffic cooperates. "The rain's getting worse." "The patient may not have 15 minutes. Rosa's voice was tight with concern. "Keep them stable. I'm leaving now." He ended the call and turned to Naomi. "I have to go," she said firmly. "Just be careful in this weather." He nodded, already dialing back to the hospital as he headed for the door. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the porch roof. Rosa picked up immediately. "Put me on speaker in the OR," Elijah instructed, jogging to his car. "I want to walk the team through prep while I drive." He slid behind the wheel of his Mercedes, the leather seat still holding warmth from his drive home. The engine purred to life as Rosa's voice came back, now with the distinct echo of the operating room's acoustics. "You're on speaker, Dr. Reed. Team's assembling now. Listen up," he projected his voice clearly, while pulling out of the driveway. "This is a complex thoracic repair under extreme pressure. I need everything ready the moment I walk in. Anesthesia team, start your assessment immediately. I want all monitoring lines in place before I arrive. He heard voices acknowledging as he turned onto the main road. The streetlights gleamed off the wet pavement, creating halos in the darkness. His windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm. Blood bank, he continued. I want 6 units minimum standing by. Set up the rapid infuser. Imaging team, get me current films the second they're available. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. BP's still dropping, a voice reported in the background. Down to 8250. Start pressors, Elijah ordered, taking a corner with careful speed. Small bolus of phenylephrine while you're getting the dopamine drip ready. Watch for rebound. The familiar focus of crisis response settled over him. This was where he lived, in the space between life and death, where precision and speed made all the difference. He'd performed hundreds of emergency thoracic repairs over his career. Each one was different, but the fundamental principles remained the same. Control the bleeding, repair the damage, keep the patient alive. Through the speaker, he could hear the organized chaos of his team preparing, the clatter of instruments, the beep of monitors, the rapid-fire communication of professionals who knew their roles. He'd trained many of them himself over the years. Rosa, what's the patient's age and medical history? Female, late 50s. History of hypertension. No other major issues in the file. Elijah processed this as he navigated through the thickening rain. The wipers could barely keep up now. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the road ahead, where reflections of distant emergency lights flickered against the wet streets. Start gathering consent forms, he instructed. We'll need family authorization for additional procedures if complications arise, and make sure. A police siren wailed in the distance. Elijah checked his speedometer, aware he was pushing the limit, but knowing every second counted. The OR team was working furiously to buy him time, but some repairs couldn't wait. If the aneurysm had fully ruptured, the patient's survival would depend on how quickly he could reach her. He pressed the accelerator a little harder, hands steady on the wheel, as his headlights cut through the rain. The hospital was still 10 minutes away under normal conditions. In this weather, with a life hanging in the balance, those minutes would feel like hours. Dr. Elijah Reed pressed steadily through the rain-slicked streets, his Mercedes cutting through sheets of water while his hands remained firm on the wheel. Through the car's speaker system, Rosa's voice crackled with updates from the operating room. Blood pressure's hovering at 80/45, Doctor, Rosa reported. We've started the pressors. Good. Position her right side up, 30-degree angle, Elijah instructed. I need full access to the thoracic cavity the moment I arrive. Make sure you have the rapid infuser primed and... Red and blue lights suddenly exploded in his rearview mirror, strobing against the wet darkness. Elijah's stomach tightened, but he maintained his composure, smoothly signaling and pulling to the curb. He could hear the OR team's concerned murmurs through the speakers. Rosa, I'm being pulled over. Keep the patient stable. I'll get this sorted quickly. He lowered his window as rain spattered inside, reaching carefully for his wallet and hospital ID badge clipped to his jacket. The police cruiser's spotlight swept across his mirrors, nearly blinding him. Through the glare, he could make out a broad-shouldered officer approaching, hand resting near his weapon. Officer Brent Holloway's face appeared at the window, jaw set tight, eyes hard with immediate suspicion. License and registration, Holloway barked over the sound of rain and passing traffic. You know how fast you are going? Officer, I'm Dr. Elijah Reed from St. Catherine Medical Center. Elijah spoke clearly and calmly, holding up his hospital ID. I'm responding to an emergency surgery. The patient is critical and— I asked for your license and registration. Holloway cut him off, deliberately ignoring the ID badge. And whose car is this? This is my car, officer. I'm reaching for my documents now. Elijah moved slowly, acutely aware of Holloway's hand still hovering near his weapon. But please, there's a woman dying on my operating table. You can verify with the hospital or dispatch. Holloway's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Right. Everyone's got an emergency when they get caught. Nice ride for a hospital worker, though. He swept his flashlight across the leather interior. How'd you afford something like this? I'm the chief of trauma surgery, Elijah replied, keeping his voice steady despite the growing urgency in his chest. Through the speakers, he could hear the OR team working. Please, officer, call the hospital. They'll confirm everything I'm telling you. Sure they will. Holloway's tone dripped with sarcasm. He leaned closer to the window, rain running down his face. You know how many people try to play doctor with fake IDs? Step out of the vehicle. Officer, I'm begging you to verify my credentials. Every minute matters right now. Elijah tried to keep the desperation from his voice, but the knowledge of his patient's declining condition weighed heavily. Boy, when I tell you to step out, you step out. Holloway's voice turned hard. More cars were slowing now, headlights illuminating the scene through the rain. Unless you've got something to hide. The word boy hung in the air between them, its meaning unmistakable. Elijah felt the familiar cold weight in his stomach, the one that came with watching decades of professional accomplishment dissolve in the face of predetermined judgment. My hospital ID is right here, Elijah said, fighting to maintain his professional tone. My medical license is in my wallet. I can show you. All I see is someone in an expensive car. He probably can't explain, trying to talk his way out of a ticket. Holloway stepped back slightly, his hand now firmly on his weapon. Last chance. Exit the vehicle. Through the speakers, Elijah heard Rosa's voice. BP's dropping again, doctor. We need you here. Officer, please. Elijah tried one more time, gesturing toward his dashboard. My credentials are right there in my phone case. I can prove everything I'm saying if you'll just— The moment his hand moved toward the dashboard, Holloway yanked the car door open with violent force. Rain poured in as the officer's face contorted with manufactured anger. Out! Now! Hands where I can see them! The order boomed over the sound of rain and passing traffic. Elijah could see phones being raised in nearby cars, recording what was unfolding. His surgical team was still listening, witnessing his humiliation in real time. Everything he had built over his career, his reputation, his dignity, his authority, was crumbling in the space of minutes, washed away by the rain and one officer's refusal to see him as anything but a threat. I'm complying, Elijah said clearly, wanting the growing audience to hear his rationality. But I need you to understand there is a critical patient waiting for emergency surgery. Save the stories, Holloway growled. Get out of the car. Now. Elijah looked at his hands gripping the steering wheel, the same hands that had saved countless lives in his operating room. In moments, they would be forced behind his back, while a woman possibly died waiting for him. The injustice of it burned in his throat, but he knew any show of that anger would only make things worse. Slowly, deliberately, he unbuckled his seatbelt. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof of his car like a countdown, each drop marking seconds his patient couldn't spare. The rain pelted Elijah's face as he stood beside his Mercedes, water already soaking through his dress shirt. Officer Holloway loomed over him, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Through the car's open door, Rose's voice crackled with mounting concern from the speakerphone. "Dr. Reed, what's happening? The patient's pressure is falling. Officer, please!" Elijah tried one final time, his voice tight but controlled. "There is a woman on my operating table right now who will die without immediate surgery. I'm begging you to verify my credentials with the hospital." "Shut up about the hospital," Holloway snapped, moving closer. "Nobody's buying your story. Turn around and put your hands on the vehicle." "Doctor," Rose's voice called out again. "We need you here now." Elijah remained frozen for a moment, torn between compliance and desperation. His hospital ID badge hung clearly visible on his jacket, the St. Catherine logo illuminated by the cruiser's lights. The absurdity of it all, standing in the rain while his patient slipped away, his identity denied despite proof literally hanging from his chest, made his throat tight with frustrated anger. "I said, turn around!" Holloway grabbed Elijah's shoulder and roughly spun him toward the car, slamming him against the wet metal. The impact knocked his phone loose from his pocket. Instinctively, Elijah twisted to catch it, his last connection to the operating room. "Wait! My phone! Stop resisting!" Holloway roared. In one violent motion, he swept Elijah's legs and drove him face first toward the pavement. Elijah's cheek hit the wet asphalt hard. Before he could speak, Holloway's knee crashed into his back, driving the air from his lungs. White-hot pain exploded through his right shoulder as the officer wrenched his arm up at a savage angle. "Please," Elijah gasped, rain mixing with blood from where his face had scraped the road. "My shoulder. I'm a surgeon. I need my hands." "Quit fighting." Holloway pressed harder, though Elijah hadn't moved. The phone skittered across the wet pavement, still connected to the horrified surgical team listening to their doctor's humiliation. Headlights swept across the scene as more cars slowed. Phone cameras appeared in windows. A small crowd began gathering on the sidewalk, their faces lit by screens as they recorded. Not one person stepped forward to intervene. Another police cruiser pulled up, and Sergeant Dale Mercer emerged, taking in the scene with calculated indifference. "Sergeant," Elijah called out, hoping for reason, "please check my credentials. There's a critical patient waiting for emergency surgery. Every minute." "He was combative when I stopped him," Holloway interrupted, speaking to Mercer while keeping his knee planted in Elijah's back. "Kept trying to reach for something in the car, making excuses about being some kind of doctor." Mercer glanced at Elijah's hospital ID, lying clearly visible nearby, then deliberately looked away. "Better cuff him before he causes more trouble." The cold steel of handcuffs bit into Elijah's wrists. His shoulders screamed in protest as Holloway roughly secured them, the pain so intense it brought tears to his eyes. Not from the physical agony alone, but from the knowledge that his patient's chances were slipping away with each passing second. Through the rain, he could hear murmurs from the growing crowd. "Why are they being so rough? He's wearing doctor's ID. Somebody should call the hospital." But no one did. They just watched and filmed as Elijah, chief of trauma surgery, save of countless lives, lay handcuffed in a puddle while his patient waited for hands that wouldn't come. "My credentials are right there," Elijah said, his voice hoarse but dignified, even as rain ran down his face. "My hospital ID, my medical license, my surgical credentials, just check them, please." "You can save the performance," Mercer replied coldly. "There's plenty of cameras already." More patrol cars arrived, their lights painting the wet street in swirling red and blue. Officers stood around exchanging knowing looks, while Elijah remained face down on the pavement, his expensive suit soaked through, his shoulder throbbing with a pain that threatened his surgical future. From his fallen phone, he could still hear Rosa's increasingly frantic voice. "Dr. Reed? Doctor, are you there? Someone tell me what's happening. We're losing her." Holloway kicked the phone, sending it skittering further away. The screen cracked against the curb, and finally, the line went dead. At St. Catherine Medical Center, Rosa stared at the silent phone in horror, the flat tone echoing through the operating room. The surgical team exchanged desperate looks as their patient's vitals continued to deteriorate. Their brilliant surgeon, the man they trusted with the most critical cases, hadn't just been delayed. He had been taken. And a woman's life hung in the balance while he lay handcuffed in the rain, his identity erased by those sworn to protect, his dignity stripped away by those who refused to see him as anything but a threat. The operating room's monitors continued their ominous beeping as Rosa realized the full weight of what was happening. She gripped the phone so tight her knuckles went white, knowing that somewhere out there, Dr. Reed was facing something far worse than a simple traffic stop. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness as Elijah lay handcuffed on the wet pavement. His shoulder throbbed where Holloway had wrenched it, each pulse of pain a reminder of what this might cost him in the operating room. Around him, the crowd of onlookers had grown, their phone cameras still recording every humiliating moment. Across town, at St. Catherine Medical Center, Rosa Delgado's fingers flew across the phone keypad, punching in the police dispatch number for the third time. The operating room behind her hummed with tense activity as nurses and technicians fought to keep their patient stable. But Rosa could see the monitors showing deteriorating vital signs. "This is charge nurse Rosa Delgado at St. Catherine Medical Center," she barked into the phone, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to managing life-and-death situations. "I need immediate verification of a police stop involving Dr. Elijah Reed, Chief of Trauma Surgery. He was en route to perform emergency surgery when your officers detained him." The dispatcher started to give her a standard response, but Rosa cut through it. "No, you listen to me. Dr. Elijah Reed, medical license number 2754993, hospital ID 8844. He is our leading trauma surgeon, and we have a critical patient dying on this table. Verify his credentials now." Back at the scene, rainwater pooled around Elijah's face as he tried to shift his weight to ease the grinding pain in his shoulder. Officer Simon Graves, one of the younger patrol officers who had arrived later, noticed Elijah's hospital ID card lying face up in a puddle. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands as Rosa's calls finally reached dispatch. Graves keyed his radio. "Dispatch, can you confirm credentials for a Dr. Elijah Reed from St. Catherine Medical Center?" The response crackled back almost immediately. "Confirmed. St. Catherine has been calling repeatedly. Subject is verified as Chief of Trauma Surgery. Hospital reports emergency situation pending." Holloway and Mercer exchanged quick, panicked looks. The crowd had heard the radio exchange, and phones were still recording. Mercer moved first, his face tight with barely controlled alarm. "Remove those cuffs," he ordered sharply, trying to sound authoritative rather than defensive. "Now." Holloway fumbled with the handcuff key, his earlier arrogance replaced by barely concealed fear as he realized the magnitude of their mistake. The cuffs clicked open, and Elijah slowly pushed himself up from the wet pavement, his right arm held stiffly against his side. "You're free to go," Mercer announced flatly, as if they'd just finished a routine traffic stop. No apology, no offer of assistance, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. His only concern now was damage control. Elijah's suit was soaked and filthy, streaked with road grime and spots of blood where his face had scraped the asphalt. He didn't waste breath arguing or demanding justice. There was no time. His patient needed him. He retrieved his cracked phone from the gutter and limped to his car, each movement sending fresh waves of pain through his abused shoulder. The crowd parted silently as he passed, their cameras still rolling. Some looked ashamed for not speaking up sooner. Others glared at the officers who now stood awkwardly by their cruisers, trying to appear busy with paperwork. Neither Holloway nor Mercer offered to escort him to the hospital. They didn't even watch as he carefully eased himself into the driver's seat, his right arm nearly useless. Their only priority now was protecting themselves, discussing in low voices how to frame their report. Elijah's hands shook as he started the engine. The adrenaline surging through his system helped dim the pain, but he knew his shoulder was seriously injured. He forced himself to focus on what mattered: his patient, the surgery, the life hanging in the balance. The drive to St. Catherine felt endless. Every bump sent spikes of agony through his shoulder. His wet clothes clung uncomfortably, and his face stung where it had been pressed into the pavement. But he pushed it all aside, mentally reviewing the procedure ahead, determining how to compensate for his injured arm. Finally, the hospital's emergency entrance came into view. Rosa was already running out to meet him, her face drawn with worry. She took one look at his condition: the mud-stained suit, the way he held his arm, the scrape on his cheek, and her expression hardened with fury. "Dr. Reed," she said, helping him from the car, "the patient is prepped and waiting. But there's something you need to know." She paused, then delivered the words that would change everything. "The patient is Evelyn Vance, Police Chief Harold Vance's wife." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elijah rushed through the secured corridor, his wet shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Rosa matched his pace, rattling off vital signs and updates, while other staff members stared at his disheveled appearance. "BP's dropping, Dr. Reed. We're transfusing the 3rd unit, but she's still losing ground," Rosa reported, her voice tight with urgency. "And there's something else. The patient is Evelyn Vance, Chief Vance's wife. Ruptured thoracic aneurysm, just like we feared." Elijah absorbed this information without breaking stride. His shoulders screamed in protest as he pushed through the double doors leading to the surgical suite. The pain threatened to overwhelm him, but decades of training kicked in. He forced everything else away: the arrest, the humiliation, the injury, and focused solely on the life hanging in the balance. "Get me Dr. Torres for assist," he ordered, wincing as he started scrubbing. "And page anesthesia for additional support. We'll need perfect pressure control." Rosa noticed his stiff movements. "Your shoulder." "We'll have to wait," Elijah cut her off. He scrubbed harder, ignoring how each movement sent daggers of pain down his arm. "Get me a pressure dressing and some lidocaine. I'll manage." The operating room was already prepped, instruments gleaming under harsh lights. As the surgical team helped him gown and glove, Elijah caught glimpses of his reflection in the steel cabinets. Rain-soaked hair, a darkening bruise on his cheekbone, mud still clinging to his neck. He looked more like an assault victim than a surgeon. But when he stepped up to the table, none of that mattered. Evelyn Vance lay unconscious before him, her vital signs growing more unstable by the minute. The monitor's shrill beeping warned of dropping pressure. "10 blade!" he called out, his voice steady despite everything. His hands remained rock solid as he made the initial incision. This was his element, where nothing existed except the patient and the precise movements that meant survival. In the waiting area, Chief Harold Vance burst through the doors, still in his dress uniform from an evening function. His face was ashen as hospital staff directed him to the surgical waiting room. He paced restlessly, demanding updates every few minutes. Back in the OR, Elijah worked with mechanical precision, adapting his technique to protect his injured shoulder. When his right arm trembled from strain, he adjusted his stance and relied more heavily on his left. The aneurysm repair was delicate work under the best conditions. With his injury, every movement required intense concentration. "Pressure's stabilizing," the anesthesiologist announced after the second hour. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." Sweat dripped down Elijah's face inside his surgical mask. The lidocaine was wearing off, each movement sending fresh waves of agony through his shoulder. But his hands never wavered as he placed the final sutures. "Close for me," he instructed Dr. Torres as he stepped back from the table. The monitors showed strong vital signs. Against considerable odds, Evelyn Vance would live. Rosa found him in the scrub room, struggling to peel off his gloves with trembling fingers. "Chief Vance is outside," she said quietly. "He knows what happened on your way in. I had to tell him why you were delayed." Elijah nodded tiredly. His surgical focus was fading, allowing pain and exhaustion to crash back in. When he emerged from the OR, still in his surgical gown, he found Vance waiting with several other officers. The chief's expression shifted as he took in Elijah's appearance. The mud-stained clothes visible beneath the surgical gown, the scrape on his cheek, the way he held his arm. For a moment, genuine horror flickered across his face. "My wife?" Vance asked hoarsely. "She's stable," Elijah replied. "The repair was successful. Dr. Torres will speak with you about recovery details shortly." Vance stepped forward, conflict evident in his features. But before he could speak, two men in suits appeared beside him. "Internal affairs," Elijah realized with weary resignation. "Dr. Reed," one of them said smoothly, "we'll need to get your statement about tonight's incident." Almost simultaneously, hospital CEO Grant Hollis emerged from his office, his face a careful mask of professional concern. "Dr. Reed, let's discuss this in private. We need to handle this situation appropriately." The word "situation" hung in the air like smoke. Elijah saw the machinery of damage control grinding into motion. The quick sideways glances, the carefully chosen words, the subtle pressure already building. Hollis guided him toward the administrative offices, away from the gathering crowd of curious staff. His tone was precisely calibrated to sound sympathetic, while conveying an unmistakable warning. "Before anything goes public, we should review exactly what happened. The hospital has certain protocols for incidents involving law enforcement." Dawn was breaking outside the windows, painting the sky in shades of gray. Elijah's shoulder throbbed in time with his pulse as Hollis closed the office door behind them. "Dr. Reed," the CEO said carefully, "what are your thoughts about handling this matter?" Internally, the emergency department's treatment room felt sterile and cold as Dr. Sarah Martinez gently probed Elijah's shoulder. Each touch sent sharp jolts of pain radiating down his arm. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting the scrape on his cheek where it had met the wet pavement. "Can you make a fist for me?" Dr. Martinez asked, watching his hand closely. Elijah tried, but his fingers trembled with the effort. The same hands that had just completed delicate vascular surgery now struggled with this basic movement. "We need to get imaging right away," Martinez said, frowning. I'm concerned about potential nerve impingement from the trauma. The way they wrenched your arm. The door burst open as Naomi rushed in, her eyes wide with worry. She'd thrown on clothes hastily, her usually neat hair pulled back messily. "Elijah!" She moved to his side, carefully touching his uninjured arm. "Rosa called me. She told me everything." Elijah tried to smile reassuringly, but exhaustion and pain made it more of a grimace. "I'm okay. The patient survived. That's what matters." "The patient survived because you performed surgery while injured," Naomi said firmly, her voice tight with controlled anger. "After they assaulted you for trying to get here." "Mrs. Reed," Dr. Martinez interjected, "your husband needs an MRI and nerve conduction studies. The way his hand is tremoring." Before she could finish, the door opened again. Hospital CEO Grant Hollis entered, followed by a sharp-featured woman in a business suit who carried a leather portfolio. Hollis's normally polished appearance showed signs of having been rushed to the hospital. His tie slightly askew, his silver hair not perfectly combed. "Dr. Reed," Hollis said smoothly. "This is Patricia Manning from our legal department. We need to discuss how to handle this situation." Naomi stepped protectively closer to Elijah. "The situation where police officers assaulted my husband while he was trying to save a life?" Manning cleared her throat. "We should be very careful about using terms like assault until all the facts are reviewed. These kinds of incidents are complex." "Complex?" Naomi's voice could have cut steel. "My husband identified himself as a surgeon. They ignored his hospital ID. They injured him. What's complex about that?" "Mrs. Reed," Hollis said placatingly, "we all want to handle this appropriately, but making public accusations before the full review process—" Elijah's phone buzzed on the examination table, then buzzed again, and again. Naomi picked it up, her expression darkening as she read the screen. "Well, it seems the police department isn't waiting for any review process," she said bitterly. "Someone's already talking to the press." She held up the phone, showing a local crime blog post that was rapidly spreading. "Sources say an erratic driver became confrontational during a routine traffic stop last night, refusing to comply with officer commands and causing his own delay to hospital duties. The driver, identified as Dr. Elijah Reed, was temporarily detained until his identity could be verified." "This is coordinated," Naomi said, her eyes flashing. "They're getting ahead of the story, painting Elijah as the problem before the truth can come out." As if to confirm her words, Chief Harold Vance appeared in the doorway. He'd removed his formal uniform jacket, and his face showed the strain of the night's events. His eyes moved from Elijah's injured shoulder to the scrape on his face, then quickly away. "Dr. Reed," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you personally. The surgical team says you saved Evelyn's life, despite—" He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at Elijah's injuries. "Chief Vance," Elijah said, his voice hoarse but steady, "your officers need to be held accountable. They wouldn't listen, wouldn't verify my credentials, wouldn't call dispatch. The delay could have cost your wife's life." Vance shifted uncomfortably. "I understand you're upset. The department will conduct a thorough review." "A review?" Naomi interrupted. "Your wife almost died while your officers had my husband face down in the rain. And now your people are already spinning lies about him being erratic and confrontational." "Mrs. Reed, these situations require careful examination of all perspectives. The truth is the only perspective that matters," Elijah said quietly. "Chief, I'm not looking for revenge. I just want honesty about what happened." Vance wouldn't meet his eyes. I'll make sure the review is thorough, he repeated, then quickly excused himself. Hollis cleared his throat. Dr. Reed, perhaps you should take a few days off to rest. The hospital will need to conduct its own review of the incident's impact on patient care. Patient care? Naomi's voice rose. He saved her life. More notifications buzzed on Elijah's phone. With a growing sense of dread, he opened his social media feed. His name was trending, accompanied by phrases like reckless doctor and road rage incident. The carefully crafted narrative was already spreading, twisting truth into something unrecognizable in the harsh morning light, now streaming through the hospital windows. Dr. Martinez tried to redirect attention to the medical concerns. He needs imaging studies immediately. The nerve damage could be— Of course, Hollis interrupted smoothly. We'll schedule those right away. In the meantime, Dr. Reed, please don't make any public statements without consulting legal affairs first. We need to manage this situation delicately. The hospital corridors felt different now. Elijah walked between Naomi and Lena, his arm in a sling, past nurses and doctors who quickly looked away. Their silence spoke volumes. Everyone scared to talk. Lena said quietly, "That's how they maintain control." Rosa met them at radiology, her face tight with worry. She pulled them into an empty consultation room and closed the door. "They're trying to make this disappear," she said. Administration sent out an email about proper channels for media inquiries? That's code for keep your mouth shut. Who sent the email? Lena asked, already taking notes. CEO Hollis himself. He never sends all staff emails. Rosa shook her head. People are talking, though. The whole OR team heard what happened over the phone. The radiologist called Elijah in for imaging. Each movement of his shoulder sent sharp pains down his arm. As he lay still under the machine's whirring eye, he tried not to think about what this could mean for his surgical career. The results came back quickly. Dr. Warner, the attending radiologist, pointed to areas of concern on the scan. There's significant soft tissue damage here and here. But what worries me most is the potential nerve involvement. See this area? Elijah saw it. After decades of reading scans, he knew exactly what he was looking at. The kind of damage that could end a surgeon's career. We'll need further testing, Dr. Warner continued, but you should prepare for the possibility of reduced fine motor control. The words hit like physical blows. Reduced fine motor control. For a trauma surgeon, that was a death sentence. Naomi squeezed his good hand while Lena paced the room, fury building in every step. This is exactly what I meant, she said. They didn't just hurt you. They tried to take everything. Let's go see Rosa's update on Evelyn, Elijah said quietly, needing to focus on something else. In ICU, they found Evelyn Vance awake but groggy. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, but her eyes were alert. When she saw Elijah, recognition flickered across her face. "You're the surgeon," she said weakly. "I remember your voice, before everything went dark." "Yes, Mrs. Vance, I'm Dr. Reed." They said. There was a delay. Something about police? Her voice was scratchy but determined. Before Elijah could answer, Chief Vance entered the room. He stopped short at seeing them all there. "Harold," Evelyn said, "did your officers do this? Did they hurt the doctor who saved me?" The chief's face tightened. He looked everywhere but at his wife. "There was an unfortunate incident during a traffic stop. We're conducting a thorough internal review." "That's not what I asked." Even weak, Evelyn's voice carried steel. "Did your officers hurt him?" "It's complicated, honey. Procedure has to be followed. Once all the facts are gathered, look at his face, Harold. Look at his arm. Is that procedure? The chief's professional mask slipped for just a moment. Guilt crossed his features before being replaced by careful neutrality. Doctor? Reed, could we speak privately? In the consultation room, Chief Vance closed the door and lowered his voice. I want you to know I'm taking this very seriously. But these situations are delicate. If we move too fast, make accusations without proper review. With all due respect, Lena cut in, there's nothing delicate about what happened. Your officers assaulted a surgeon racing to save your wife, and I'm grateful he saved her. But we have processes designed to protect the department, not find truth, Lena said. The chief's jaw tightened. I'm trying to handle this internally. Keep it from becoming a media circus. If you'll just be patient. Patient? Naomi's quiet voice carried more weight than Lena's anger. While you handle it internally, someone is already handling the story externally, painting my husband as reckless and aggressive. Is that part of your process too? I can't control what reporters, but you can control your officers' statements, the leaks, the narrative being built. Naomi held his gaze. You're asking for patience while allowing your department to destroy my husband's reputation. Before Vance could respond, Lena's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her expression darkened. Speaking of narrative control, she said, turning the phone so they could all see, the department just released selective body cam footage, starting after Dad was already out of the car. The timestamp showed only the final moments. Elijah already pressed against the vehicle, Holloway claiming he was resisting. Everything before that point, everything that would show the true escalation, had been cut. The Reed family's living room felt too small, too confined, as they watched the body cam footage for the third time. On screen, a rain-soaked Elijah stood against his car, face twisted in pain. The clip started there, conveniently missing everything that came before. Look how they edited this, Lena said, leaning forward. No context. Just you looking upset, and Holloway claiming you're not complying. Elijah sat rigid on the couch, his injured arm cradled against his chest. The pain medication barely touched the throbbing in his shoulder. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to watching himself become a carefully crafted villain in real time. Naomi's phone buzzed again, the 10th message in as many minutes. Another colleague asking if you're okay, she said quietly. Though some of these messages feel more like people checking for gossip than showing real concern. Online comments scrolled beneath news articles sharing the clip. If he was really rushing to save someone, why get confrontational with police? One read. Another, typical entitled doctor who thinks rules don't apply to him. They don't even mention you actually saved her, Lena muttered, furiously taking notes. Or that the patient was the chief's wife. Just, doctor claims he was headed to emergency surgery. Elijah's phone lit up with a message from Rosa. Everyone in OR is furious. Nurses want to speak up, but admin is watching like hawks. Hollis called emergency department head meeting. As if on cue, an email arrived from the hospital administration. Elijah read it aloud, his voice flat. In light of recent events, and to ensure proper recovery time, Dr. Reed is being placed on temporary medical leave, effective immediately. This standard precautionary measure, Lena cut in. That's rich. They're hiding you away until this blows over. The email CC'd the board of directors, Elijah noted. They're covering themselves legally. Naomi squeezed his good hand. How are you really doing?" Elijah was quiet for a long moment. "You know what keeps hitting me? 25 years at that hospital. Thousands of surgeries. Countless nights and weekends dropped everything to save lives. But none of that mattered to Holloway. One look at my face, and he decided what I was. That's exactly why we need to fight this," Lena said, spreading papers across the coffee table. "I'm building a timeline. Dispatch calls, surgery records, social media posts, everything. Look, your first call with Rosa was 11:42 p.m. Traffic stop started at 11:57 p.m. First bystander video posted at 12:03 a.m. More messages poured in as local news stations picked up the story. Comments sections filled with debate. Some defended Elijah, but others questioned his attitude and reckless driving. "They're trying to make this about your behavior instead of theirs," Naomi observed. Rosa sent another update. 3 nurses ready to give statements about what we heard on phone. Hollis indirectly threatened write-ups for unauthorized media contact. But something else was happening, too. Community members began sharing their own stories on social media. A black business owner described being handcuffed outside his own store. A woman recalled officers refusing to believe she lived in her neighborhood. A medical student shared being stopped 3 times in 1 month driving to rotations. "This is bigger than one night," Lena said, adding screenshots to her growing file. "You're just the most visible example of what happens constantly." Elijah watched another news segment loop the body cam clip. "They keep showing me angry, but not what made me angry. The public sees the reaction without the cause." "Classic tactic," Lena replied. "Control the starting point, control the narrative." Naomi studied her husband's face. "What would you have done differently?" "That's what keeps me up," Elijah said. "I did everything right. Pulled over immediately, kept my hands visible, spoke calmly, showed ID, called them sir. And none of it mattered because Holloway decided what he saw before he ever reached my window." The night deepened. More stories emerged. More messages arrived. Lena kept building her timeline, cross-referencing timestamps and documents. Around midnight, she sat up straighter, frowning at her laptop. "Wait, something's wrong with these timestamps." She pulled up the full metadata from the released body cam footage. "Look at this gap. The video jumps from 11:59 p.m. to 12:04 a.m. 5 whole minutes missing." "Those would be the worst minutes," Elijah said quietly. "The takedown, the knee in my back, when he wrenched my shoulder." "Convenient that those moments didn't make the edit," Lena said, highlighting the gap in her notes. Naomi looked between her daughter's determined face and her husband's weary one. "So, what happens now?" "Now," Lena said, "we find out what they're hiding in those missing minutes." Morning light crept through the kitchen windows, but no one in the Reed house had truly slept. Lena sat surrounded by papers and laptops, her fingers moving across keyboards with fierce determination. Coffee cups littered the table, testament to the hours she'd worked through the night. Naomi moved quietly through the kitchen, starting another pot of coffee. Her eyes kept drifting to Elijah, who stood at the counter trying to hold a glass of water. His right hand trembled, spilling drops onto the marble surface. "Let me get that for you," Naomi said, reaching for the glass. Elijah pulled back. "I need to do this myself." His voice was tight with frustration as more water splashed over the rim. Lena looked up from her screen. "Dad, fighting your body won't help. We need you focused on the bigger battle." "Got it." She suddenly straightened, pointing at her laptop. "I found someone. The timestamp matches. He was filming from across the street when it happened." Elijah set down the glass, giving up the fight with his trembling hand. Who? College student named Marcus Webb. He posted a clip online, but took it down after police supporters started harassing him. I tracked him through mutual connections. He's willing to meet. Naomi brought fresh coffee to the table. Are you sure he's reliable? He's scared but angry. Says he couldn't sleep after watching what happened. He kept the full video. By mid-morning, they sat in a quiet coffee shop near the university campus. Marcus, a lanky pre-med student, nervously handed over his phone. I saved everything. It's all there, unedited. The video started earlier than any previous footage. It showed Elijah's car pulling over, his immediate compliance. Then Holloway approaching, aggressive from the first moment. The crucial missing minutes played out in devastating clarity. Holloway yanking the door open, shoving Elijah without provocation, escalating the situation while Elijah tried to explain about the emergency surgery. This changes everything, Lena said, immediately backing up the video to secure drives. Around noon, their phones exploded with notifications. Evelyn Vance had given a statement from her hospital bed, her voice weak but determined. I need to be clear about what happened. The surgeon these officers assaulted is the same man who saved my life. Despite their actions, despite his injuries, Dr. Reed still performed my operation. I'm alive because he refused to let their cruelty stop him from doing his duty. The impact was immediate. News outlets that had questioned Elijah's account now wanted exclusive interviews. Social media lit up with support. Rosa sent excited messages about nurses gathering in break rooms to watch Evelyn's statement, cheering and crying. Even the chief can't ignore this, Naomi said, scrolling through reactions. His own wife just drew a line in the sand. For the first time since the arrest, Elijah felt a weight lift slightly from his chest. Maybe we can still fix this without destroying everything I've built. His phone buzzed with supportive messages from colleagues, patients' families, and community leaders. Local news channels were running side-by-side comparisons of the official body cam edit versus the full civilian footage, highlighting the department's attempted deception. Look at this, Lena said, showing them her screen. 3 other officers have come forward about previous incidents with Holloway. They were scared to speak up before, but now... The morning's triumph lasted exactly 4 hours. At 2 p.m., hospital CEO Grant Hollis called a press conference. His words were carefully chosen, wrapped in concern. Given the physical and emotional trauma Dr. Reed experienced, the hospital is initiating an independent review of surgical competency. While we respect Dr. Reed's service, patient safety must be our primary concern. Elijah sat heavily in his kitchen chair. They're not just questioning that night anymore. They're questioning every surgery I've ever performed. They're scared, Lena insisted. The department is exposed, so they're trying to shift blame. Make it about your judgment instead of police brutality. Hollis is protecting the hospital's reputation, Naomi added. If they admit the police delayed a critical surgery, it opens liability issues. But Elijah barely heard them. He stared at his trembling right hand, the same hand that had performed thousands of precise procedures, the same hand that saved Evelyn Vance's life just days ago. At 4:30 p.m., he sat in a sterile exam room at occupational medicine, trying to thread a suture through surgical mesh. The evaluator watched silently as Elijah's fingers shook, the needle dancing erratically. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The tremors grew worse with each attempt. "Dr. Reed," the evaluator finally said, "I think we should stop here." Elijah looked down at his betraying hand, the instrument that had defined his life for 25 years, now quivering like a leaf in the wind. The evaluation form on the desk remained incomplete, but its message was clear. He was, for now at least, unfit for surgery. Elijah's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, but the right one wouldn't stop shaking. The concrete walls of the hospital parking structure seemed to close in around him. Naomi sat quietly in the passenger seat, while Lena's voice came through the car speakers. "What exactly did the evaluator say?" Lena asked. She didn't have to say much. Elijah's voice was hollow. "My hands are supposed to be steady enough to repair blood vessels smaller than a pencil line. You saw what happened with that glass of water this morning. I couldn't even complete basic suturing tests." "It could be temporary," Naomi said softly. "Stress, trauma, inflammation from the injury, or nerve damage from being slammed into the pavement." Elijah's words came out sharp, bitter. 25 years of training, of building trust, of proving myself. And Holloway took it away in seconds. His phone buzzed. The hospital's medical staff office had already received the evaluation results. The message was direct. Effective immediately, he was barred from all surgical procedures pending comprehensive review. Naomi read the message over his shoulder. They didn't even wait 24 hours. "They're scared," Lena said. "If they admit the police caused this, they're liable for every surgery you can't perform. The same hospital where I've saved hundreds of lives," Elijah's voice cracked, "where I've trained residents, covered emergency calls, built entire programs. Now I'm just a liability to manage." They drove home in heavy silence. But before they reached the house, Lena called back. "Turn on Channel 4. Now!" Naomi found the station on her phone. A police union spokesperson filled the screen, his tone aggressive. "Dr. Reed is attempting to weaponize race to distract from his own reckless choices that night. He endangered lives by speeding, became confrontational during a lawful stop, and is now trying to profit from false accusations against dedicated officers." "Profit?" Elijah's laugh was harsh. "I can barely hold a scalpel." The spokesman continued. "Officer Holloway followed procedure and will remain on active duty while—" Naomi turned it off. "They're not even pretending to investigate anymore." They pulled into their driveway as evening settled. The house felt different now, smaller, darker, like the walls held too many broken dreams. Elijah moved through rooms touching familiar objects, his medical texts, his surgical loupes, the teaching awards on his office wall. Each item seemed to mock him. "I should have known," he said finally, sitting heavily in his study. "All these years thinking excellence would protect me, thinking if I was twice as good, worked twice as hard, stayed twice as controlled, they'd have to respect me." His voice broke. "But in the end, I was still just another black man for Holloway to put in his place." Naomi knelt beside his chair. "You are so much more than what they did to you." "Am I? Without surgery? Who am I?" His right hand trembled in his lap. "I've spent my whole life in operating rooms. It's not just what I do. It's who I am. Was. And now—" He covered his face. "I'm so tired, Naomi. Tired of being strong. Tired of having to be perfect, just to be treated like a human being." Through the speakerphone, they heard Lena's sharp intake of breath. For the first time since arriving, her voice softened. "Dad." She paused, struggling. "I've been angry because I thought you were choosing institutions over justice. But this isn't about pride or politics for you, is it? They didn't just hurt you. They tried to erase who you are." "They're still trying," Naomi said firmly. "And if we let them bury this, they'll keep doing it to others. More doctors, lawyers, teachers. More black professionals who don't know their place. Is that the legacy you want, Elijah? For all those young residents who look up to you to learn that excellence means nothing against a badge? Elijah looked at his trembling hand. I don't know if I have any fight left. Then lean on us, Naomi said. You've carried others for decades. Let us carry you now. We'll find a way, Lena added, not just to expose them, to make them face real consequences, together. The night deepened around them. Elijah sat with his family's words, feeling something shift between father and daughter. Not agreement yet, but understanding. Naomi brought tea, her quiet strength filling the room. Just before midnight, Lena's phone lit up with a text from Rosa. The young officer from the stop wants to meet. Says he has to talk tonight, but only off record. What should I tell him? The neon sign of Pete's all-night diner flickered weakly against the dark windows. Inside, Lena Reed sat alone in a corner booth, her legal pad ready, watching the door. At 12:17 a.m., Officer Simon Graves entered, still in uniform, but looking smaller somehow, shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear. He slid into the booth, eyes darting around the empty diner. Anyone follow you? No, Lena said. Just us and one cook in the back. Talk to me about what happened to my father. Simon's hands shook as he pulled papers from inside his jacket. What they did, what we did, it wasn't right. And what they're doing now is even worse. Start from the beginning, Lena said, pen poised. Everything you saw. I ran Dr. Reed's ID before Holloway took him down. The hospital confirmation came back clear. Attending surgeon, emergency privileges, everything. Simon's voice dropped lower. I radioed Sergeant Mercer right away. He acknowledged, but then he swallowed hard. Then he let Holloway escalate anyway. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi sat with Elijah in their living room. Despite the late hour, sleep felt impossible. She placed a digital recorder on the coffee table. Tell me everything you remember, she said gently. Every detail matters now. Elijah closed his eyes, his right hand trembling slightly in his lap. The rain was steady. I had Rosa on Bluetooth, going through pre-op protocols. When I saw the lights, I pulled over immediately. Back at the diner, Simon spread out documents, dispatch logs, radio transcripts, screenshots of the original incident report. Look at the timestamps, he said, pointing. This first report shows my ID verification at 11:42 p.m. But the final version they submitted? That time's been pushed back almost 15 minutes after the takedown. They're trying to hide that we knew who he was before any force was used. Lena's pen moved rapidly across her legal pad. Who altered it? Mercer ordered the changes himself, said it was clarifying the sequence of events. Simon's disgust was evident, but I kept copies of everything. I knew this wasn't right. Why come forward now? Lena studied him carefully. Because I became a cop to help people. What they did to your father, that was about power, not protection. And now they want me to lie about it. He met her eyes. I can't sleep, can't look at my badge the same way. In the Reed home, Elijah's voice grew stronger as he recounted details into the recorder. Holloway kept calling me boy, kept asking if the car was really mine. When I reached for my hospital ID, he yanked me out so fast my shoulder. He paused, rubbing his arm. I can still feel the knee in my back, the handcuffs cutting in. Naomi touched his hand. Keep going. Every word builds the truth. Near 3 a.m., Lena returned home clutching a manila envelope full of evidence. She spread everything across the dining room table. Simon's original reports, dispatch logs, timestamps, text screenshots between officers. "It's all here," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "They knew exactly who you were. They knew you were telling the truth, and they chose to hurt you anyway." Elijah stared at the papers, at the proof that his humiliation had been deliberate. His hands still shook, but his voice was steady. "They thought they could bury this because no one would believe me over them." Just before sunrise, Rosa called. "I have something else for you," she said without preamble. "I saved the audio from my calls with dispatch that night, including the exact time I told them Dr. Reed was our emergency surgeon heading in for a critical case." She paused. "It's time-stamped. They can't claim they didn't know." Naomi watched understanding spread across Elijah's face. The truth no longer depended on anyone's word against the police. It was documented, time-stamped, preserved in multiple sources. "When I was on that wet pavement," he said slowly, "I felt utterly powerless. Like nothing I'd achieved mattered against their badges and guns. But now," he touched the papers, the transcripts, the audio files. "Now we have something they can't take away or twist." The sun rose over their neighborhood as Lena organized the evidence into clear timelines. Elijah watched her work, seeing not just his daughter's legal skill, but her fierce commitment to justice. "I'm ready," he said finally, "to tell everything. To fight publicly." As morning light filled the kitchen, Naomi's phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Reed?" The voice was tired but determined. "This is Evelyn Vance. I need to speak with Dr. Reed in person before this goes to the city council." "What happened to him? What my husband's officers did? I want to look him in the eye when I tell him I won't let them bury this." The private recovery room was hushed, except for the steady beep of monitors. Evelyn Vance lay propped up against white pillows, her face pale, but her eyes sharp and focused. When Elijah entered with Naomi and Lena, she immediately reached out her hand. "Dr. Reed," she said softly, "please sit close where I can see you properly." Elijah took the chair beside her bed, noting the surgical dressing visible beneath her hospital gown. Evidence of his work that terrible night. His shoulder throbbed in its sling, a constant reminder of what had delayed him. "I need you to understand something," Evelyn continued. "Every breath I take now is because of you. Every moment I have left with my children and grandchildren exists because you refuse to give up, even after what they did to you." Naomi stood behind Elijah's chair, one hand resting protectively on his good shoulder. Lena remained near the door, her legal pad ready but silent for now. "What my husband's officers did," Evelyn's voice trembled with controlled anger. "It wasn't just wrong. It was part of a pattern they've ignored for years. Officer Holloway especially." She shifted carefully against her pillows. "There have been other complaints against him. Excessive force, racial profiling, escalating routine stops into confrontations. The department knew. Harold knew. But they buried the reports, transferred the officers who spoke up, protected their own at all costs." "How many complaints?" Lena asked quietly from her position by the door. "At least 6 formal ones I know of. Probably more that never made it to paper." Evelyn's mouth tightened. Harold would come home upset about liability issues and department morale, never about the actual people being hurt. The door opened and Chief Harold Vance entered, his face dropping when he saw all 3 Reeds present. "Evelyn, honey, you need rest. This can wait." "No, Harold, it can't." Evelyn's voice cut through his careful tone. I almost died while your officer had Dr. Reed face down in the rain because they saw a black man in an expensive car and decided their power mattered more than my life. Harold's politician's mask slipped for a moment. The situation is complex. Stop it! Evelyn's words were like ice. There's nothing complex about it. They assaulted an innocent man who was racing to save me. Then you helped cover it up, because protecting bad officers matters more to you than truth or justice. We're conducting a thorough review. They knew he was a doctor before they touched him. They had confirmation from dispatch. And they hurt him anyway. Evelyn turned back to Elijah. I won't let them bury this. I won't let them pretend it was just a misunderstanding or a training issue. Harold stepped closer to the bed. Evelyn, please think about what you're saying. The department failed. She didn't even look at her husband. It failed Dr. Reed. It failed every other person those officers have hurt. And you failed me by choosing your badge over basic human decency. Naomi's hand tightened on Elijah's shoulder. He could feel the tension radiating through the room. I will testify, Evelyn said firmly. At the city council, to the press, wherever needed. I'll tell them exactly what happened. How Dr. Reed saved my life after your officers assaulted him. How the department tried to smear him instead of admitting wrong. How you chose damage control over truth. Harold's face had gone gray. This could end my career. And that matters more to you than justice? Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. Than doing what's right? The chief had no answer. He stood frozen, caught between his wife's moral clarity and his own compromised position. Ms. Vance, Lena said, stepping forward, we have documentation proving officer misconduct and subsequent cover-up attempts. Your testimony would add crucial weight to forcing a public hearing instead of a closed review. Good. Evelyn's eyes never left her husband's face. The public deserves to know exactly what kind of department you're running, Harold. The kind that would rather destroy a good man's reputation than admit its officers were wrong. Elijah spoke for the first time since entering. Mrs. Vance, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She reached for his hand. Because next time, the person they stop might die waiting for help. Next time, there might not be someone as skilled as you to save them after being brutalized. This has to stop. Harold turned and walked out without another word. Evelyn watched him go, pain visible in her eyes, but determination unchanged. Lena, she said, please contact whoever you need to. I want to make a formal statement as soon as possible. Lena was already texting community leaders and reporters she trusted. We can force an emergency public hearing with this. Your testimony combined with our evidence, they won't be able to hide behind internal reviews anymore. Naomi helped Evelyn adjust her pillows. Are you sure you're strong enough for this? I'm alive because your husband was strong enough to perform surgery after being assaulted, Evelyn replied. The least I can do is be strong enough to tell the truth about what happened to him. Outside in the hospital corridor, they could hear phones beginning to buzz and ring as news spread that Chief Vance's wife intended to testify against his department. By early afternoon, camera crews were already gathering outside City Hall, waiting for official confirmation of an emergency hearing. Elijah watched the growing media presence through the hospital window, his shoulder aching but his spirit strengthening. For the first time since that rainy night, he felt the balance of power beginning to shift. Morning light streamed through City Hall's high windows as Elijah entered the packed chamber. His arm still hung in its sling, a visible reminder of that rainy night. Naomi walked beside him, her hand steady on his back. Lena strode ahead, carrying files and a laptop, while Rosa and Simon followed close behind. Evelyn Vance moved carefully with them, still recovering but determined. The chamber hummed with tension. Every seat was filled, with people standing 3 deep along the walls. News cameras lined the back, their red lights blinking. On one side sat a row of stern-faced officers, Holloway, Mercer, and others in crisp uniforms. Chief Vance occupied a separate table, his shoulders rigid. Council members filled the raised platform at the front. The council president's gavel cracked against wood, bringing the room to silence. "This emergency hearing," she announced, "will address the arrest of Dr. Elijah Reed and subsequent departmental actions. Ms. Reed, you may proceed." Lena rose smoothly, her heels clicking against marble as she approached the projection screen. "I'll begin with civilian video footage captured during the arrest." The footage played in stark clarity. Unlike the edited body cam teaser, this showed everything. Holloway's immediate aggression, the brutal takedown, Elijah's face hitting wet pavement. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Several council members leaned forward, faces darkening. "Next," Lena continued, "dispatch audio from that night." She played Rosa's frantic calls, her voice crystal clear as she identified Elijah as the trauma surgeon needed for emergency surgery. The timestamp glowed on screen, well before the worst violence occurred. The hospital's surgical records. Lena displayed charts showing the critical timeline. Every minute of delay increased the risk of death. Dr. Reed still performed successful surgery despite injuries sustained during his wrongful arrest. Rosa took the stand next, her nursing scrubs a splash of color in the formal chamber. "I told dispatch exactly who Dr. Reed was. I begged them to verify his credentials and let him through. Instead, they hurt him while a patient was dying on my table." Simon followed, his young face pale but voice steady. Sergeant Mercer received confirmation of Dr. Reed's identity before Officer Holloway escalated to physical force. He chose to ignore it. Later, we were instructed to adjust our report timestamps. Lena displayed the metadata analysis. These documents prove systematic alterations to official records after the fact. This was not merely a mistake. It was an orchestrated attempt to bury misconduct. Evelyn's testimony cut through the technical details with raw emotion. "I woke up and learned the surgeon who saved my life had been assaulted by my husband's officers on his way to help me. Then I watched that same department try to destroy his reputation rather than admit wrong." Harold Vance spoke next, trying to maintain his measured tone. "The department takes all allegations seriously. When did you learn Dr. Reed was the surgeon who saved your wife?" Lena interrupted. "That morning, but—" "And did you correct the false narrative being spread about him?" "The situation required careful review. Yes or no, Chief Vance? Did you allow your department to smear Dr. Reed's character after learning he had saved your wife's life?" Vance's polish cracked. "We had procedures to follow." "Procedures that protected abusive officers while punishing their victim," Lena pressed. "Procedures that valued department reputation over truth and justice." Finally, Holloway took the stand. His contempt showed immediately in his posture, in the curl of his lip. "Dr. Reed was driving recklessly. Below the speed of your own officers responding to routine calls," Lena countered. "Try again." "He was aggressive. The video shows you initiated physical contact. Would you like to watch it again?" Holloway's face flushed, dark red. "He needed to learn." "Learn what, Officer Holloway?" Lena's voice could have cut steel. "Learn his place? Learn that his credentials, his success, His desperate rush to save a life meant nothing once you decided he looked suspicious? You people always think you're special, Holloway snapped. Think you're above the law just because… You people? Lena pounced. Please clarify that statement, officer. The chamber erupted. Council members started talking all at once. Holloway realized his mistake too late, tried to backtrack, but his mask had slipped. His real face, arrogant, bigoted, unrepentant, was visible to every camera. The council president's gavel cracked repeatedly. Order! This chamber will have order! But the damage was done. Reporters were already typing furiously on phones. Spectators muttered in disgust. Even other officers shifted uncomfortably away from Holloway. Lena gathered her materials with deliberate calm. I believe the evidence speaks for itself. We have proof of excessive force, false reporting, coordinated cover-up attempts, and clear racial bias. We demand immediate termination of Officers Holloway and Mercer, and Chief Vance's resignation. As the session adjourned, reporters swarmed forward shouting questions. Camera flashes strobed through the chamber. Council members huddled in urgent discussion. Motions were already being drafted, careers ending in real time. Elijah sat quietly through the chaos, Naomi's hand still steady on his shoulder. The truth was finally out, documented and undeniable, playing on every screen in the city. The marble halls of City Hall echoed with urgent footsteps as evening settled over the city. Elijah sat with Naomi and Lena in a private conference room, watching breaking news unfold on a mounted television. Outside, protesters filled the streets, their chants for justice carrying through thick windows. Officer Holloway has been terminated effective immediately, the news anchor announced. Criminal charges are pending for assault, falsifying official records, and civil rights violations. Lena's phone buzzed constantly with updates from contacts inside the department. Mercer's suspension just came through, she reported, scanning messages. They're building a case against him for the cover-up. His pension's gone. Naomi squeezed Elijah's good hand. His shoulder still ached, but something tight in his chest had finally loosened. You were right, he told his daughters softly. The truth needed daylight. More news poured in as night fell. The police union withdrew support from Holloway after the hearing footage went viral. Mercer's supervisor role was permanently revoked. Young officers began coming forward about other incidents that had been buried. By 10 o'clock, Chief Harold Vance's carefully constructed control crumbled completely. News cameras captured him leaving headquarters, resignation letter in hand, while protesters lined his path. His political allies had abandoned him within hours of the hearing. The system only protects its own until it becomes too costly, Lena observed, watching Vance's departure. Shortly before midnight, the hospital board convened an emergency session. By morning, they announced CEO Grant Hollis had been removed for failure of leadership. His replacement issued an immediate public apology to Elijah, acknowledging the hospital's role in enabling injustice. The next weeks passed in a blur of purpose. Elijah began intensive physical therapy, working to restore strength and precision to his injured shoulder. The tremor in his hand slowly improved with specialized exercises. Naomi drove him to every appointment, while Lena coordinated with prosecutors building cases against Holloway and Mercer. Small movements first, his therapist advised, guiding him through careful finger exercises. Build the foundation back gradually. Rosa visited often, bringing updates from the surgical floor. The residents ask about you every day, she told him. They miss your teaching. Settlement talks moved quickly, pushed by public pressure and clear evidence. When the final figure was reached, Elijah knew exactly what to do with it. He established the Reed Emergency Medicine Initiative, creating scholarships for minority medical students and funding crisis response training programs. "This isn't about money," he explained at the initiative's launch. "It's about making sure the next generation of doctors never faces what I faced. It's about changing the system from within." The first scholarship recipient was a young black woman from Elijah's old neighborhood. "I want to be a trauma surgeon because of you," she told him, eyes bright with purpose. "Because you showed us they can't stop us from saving lives." Weeks turned to months. Elijah's hand grew steadier through relentless practice. He spent hours doing microsurgery exercises, rebuilding the precise control that had defined his career. The tremor faded gradually, then disappeared entirely. Finally, on a clear autumn morning, Elijah stood in the surgical prep room at St. Catherine's, carefully scrubbing his hands. The case had been chosen specifically: a complex vascular repair, the kind of procedure that had first made his reputation. Naomi, Lena, and Rosa watched through the observation window as he entered the operating room. The familiar ritual of gowning and gloving centered him. His team stood ready, welcoming him back with quiet professionalism. "Scalpel," he said clearly, and felt the weight of the instrument settle into his steady hand. The procedure began, each movement precise and controlled. Through the glass, his family watched his shoulders relax as he found his rhythm again. Hours passed in focused silence. Elijah's hands remained rock steady, muscle memory and skill flowing naturally. When the final suture was placed, he stepped back and nodded to his team. They all knew what this moment meant. "Close for me," he instructed his resident. He stripped off his gloves, flexing fingers that had healed stronger than before. As he pushed through the OR doors into the bright hospital corridor, Naomi was waiting with tears in her eyes. "Welcome back," she whispered, embracing him. Lena smiled from beside her. "You did it, Dad. You showed them all." Rosa appeared with his white coat. "The OR hasn't been the same without you, Doctor." Elijah shrugged into the coat, straightening his shoulders. Through the windows, he could see his city gleaming in the afternoon sun. A city that had learned his name first in scandal, then in triumph. A city that finally understood his worth not just as a surgeon, but as a man who refused to let injustice stand. His pager chimed with another emergency case. Without hesitation, he turned toward the surgical floor, family beside him, hands steady and sure. He had work to do. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.